welcome back into the Wolves Den. Again, we're going to kind of go low budget here. Set's not quite ready, but I think by next week we'll kind of have everything back up and running. So again, here we are down here in Studio B. Like I said, we're just kind of working through it here, and but let's get to it because we got a lot to talk about, and I'll try to keep it brief just because we are kind of just low budget. It's just you and me here. It's just you and me here. It's intimate, but we'll try to get through these things as quick as we can here. I'd really planned to just talk hoops this week, but football has reared its head again as there are more coaching staff changes that are heading the Red Wolves' way here, and I'm sure a lot of you have seen it, but this time hadn't fired anybody this time, but rather some other guys have moved on to some bigger named jobs, probably a little more pay, things like that. But the team has lost defensive coordinator Joe Cawthon, also defensive line coach Brian Early to the University of Houston, and also this one hurts the recruiting trail for sure. Cornerbacks coach Trooper Taylor heading over to Duke. So head coach Blake Anderson has got some more work to do. Has made a couple of hires already to fill those spots up. Still missing one though. But his new defensive coordinator David Duggan coming from Western Michigan. Again, this is a familiarity hire here for Coach Anderson. They had some stints together at Southern Miss and North Carolina back in the early part of this decade here. In fact, here, and let me just check my notes here. David Duggan was also in the special teams coordinator up there at Western Michigan, linebackers coach. I would assume he's going to take over basically the role that Joe Cawthon did. He was the defensive coordinator, coach linebackers. David Duggan probably going to do a bit of the same thing here. Just quickly here with him, he took the Golden Eagles from a 3-9 record in 2014 to a 9-5 in 2015. They also had that berth in the Conference USA Championship game, won the Heart of Dallas Bowl, or at least invited to it. Defense ranked third in Conference USA that year, at least in 2015. So it should be interesting. I'm not exactly sure. Hadn't done a lot of research on him yet, as this is still kind of new to a lot of us here, at least as of recording this. I'm not sure what kind of style he brings. In the MAC, it's pretty different out there. The offense is just wiling out in that conference, and I didn't really get a chance to sort of look into what sort of defense that Western Michigan was able to run. He does have a little bit of head coaching experience, so that could be something that's valuable, as he was a head coach for 2 seasons in Cologne as part of the NFL Europe. It was 06 and 07. Over there, his defense ranked number 1 both seasons that he was there. They didn't win a whole lot. He was 10-9 in those 2 seasons, so offensively, maybe they were a little challenged, but defensively, boy, they brought the wood. So these are some things that are maybe a little bit encouraging. The fact that this guy kind of knows what he's doing, and it's just a matter of plugging in his system, making sure that some of those pieces fit. So it should be interesting to see how this defense will evolve, because it's kind of been one of the stronger ones in the Sun Belt Conference, and you'd hate to have to take a step back, and especially with losing the likes of Joe Cawthon. Really all 3 of these guys, Joe Cawthon, Brian Early, and Trooper Taylor, it's really going to evolve. Things are going to be a little bit different here. But another guy that has been hired on, or at least promoted here, is defensive ends coach now, Brandon Joyner. You might recognize that name. He played for the Red Wolves in years past. In fact, he was 2011 All Sun Belt Conference honors. That was the undefeated conference season there. He had 48 tackles, 19 for a loss, 13 sacks. Still the second most in school history for one season there. He was at Texas A&M before that. Came over from Navarro College, at least in the junior college rankings. Well-known story, at least in Red Wolf circles here, as he was drafted by the Bengals, but then unfortunately had to do a little bit of a stint in prison from some actions that went down when he was 18, when he was still at Texas A&M. I believe it was a robbery of some sort. The details of that kind of escape me right now, but basically had to do some time in the pen. And the Bengals were very supportive of him at the time. And when he came back, when he got out, once they paroled him in 2013 and said, hey, man, you're doing good, he had a squeaky clean record from that point on. So I think that's kind of what really helped him out here, and that's why the Bengals really hung on to him as long as they did. And considering they're, a team of a lot of interesting characters, Joyner just kind of fit right in there, really. But for him, he was really trying to earn a spot, ended up tearing his ACL, and things just never really worked out. Came back to Arkansas State, has been a defensive grad assistant, and now it's fantastic to see him actually come on to the staff as a full-time assistant coach, and he will be coaching the defensive ends. So I'll be really excited to see what kind of impact he's going to make on this, especially having to carry the torch from a guy like Brian Early, who really had that defensive line cooking in his tenure here. But for Brandon Joyner, tons of experience, a little bit of NFL experience in there as well. So you've always got that, kind of matches wits with Malcolm Kelly, having been a wide receiver in the NFL. Kind of the same thing here with Coach Joyner now. He's going to bring a wealth of experience. He knows this league. He knows the game, and he was pretty darn good at it as well. And it's going to be fun to watch him sort of parlay his knowledge to some of these guys that are coming up here. Also of note, Terry Mohajir was announced on Wednesday afternoon that he would be on the College Football Playoff Selection Committee. Kind of a big deal. You guys might remember Arkansas. They've had a little flavor on this thing. You guys might remember Jeff Long, the University of Arkansas, was on there. He was the chairman there for a couple of years in the early stages of this thing. Terry Mohajir will now be the first active G5 representation on the CFP committee. So that's huge, and it says a lot about Terry as a guy, not only just in terms of being a G5 guy. I mean, the guy has a wealth of football knowledge. He always is preaching about student athletes, the betterment of the game, and I think you're starting to see some of the fruits of that labor, and people know who he is. I mean, it's hard not to know who he is. He's kind of a loud, boisterous kind of guy, and that gray hair is just kind of his calling card. And there ain't nothing wrong with that, Terry. I'm right there with you. I'm getting on your level, slowly but surely. But for this selection, and for Arkansas State to kind of be, the conduit of the G5 here, it's kind of a big deal. No, we're not sure yet kind of what his impact will be. I mean, obviously he starts a 3-year term in the spring, so it'll be interesting to see what he brings, because he's a pretty analytical dude. If you ever talk to him, I mean, he knows his stuff, and he really respects all levels here of the college football game, and it's going to be fairly interesting to see what kind of sway, what kind of impact he can make on that, especially being an active G5. It's not like, I was at, somewhere in North Texas yesteryear, and some of these guys, like Frank Beamer, who, coached a long time ago and never really did it in the sort of the modern G5 way. So I think it's going to be fascinating to watch him put his imprint on that. Not to say that he's going to necessarily sway things one way or the other, but to have sort of that different perspective on things, to know what it's like to be in the modern environment at the G5 level, and just the lack of respect that all the G5 conferences get when there are a lot of good teams down there. I mean, we saw UCF make their run, and that's a darn good team right there, but there are several other good teams. You had Utah State, Fresno State this past year. North Texas was pretty solid, kind of tripped up in their bowl game though, but the examples go on and on. I mean, even in the Sun Belt Conference, you had App State and Troy that, double-digit win years. So, to see some of those teams maybe get a little more of a say-so at the table, or even just any say-so at the table at this point, is going to be great to see. And our congrats to Terry for garnering that selection. And it'll be fun to watch him put his imprint on things here in the next 3 years for sure here. All right, let's get to hoops here. Big week for both teams this past week, doing the Alabama two-step. Troy and South Alabama, at least on the women's side, both those teams really, really good. On the men's side, they're all kind of middle of the pack along with Arkansas State here. And I know you guys know I love numbers. So let's get into the Arkansas State men's team here. And obviously, Ty Cockfield leading the way here, 21 a little over 21 points a game. Marquise Eaton right there behind him, about 12.5 a game. But scoring has kind of been the thing with these guys, and even in fact, they're doing okay scoring-wise. 73.5 a game. That puts them kind of 156 in the country. And we're talking out of 353 teams. So kind of, get that in your heads when I start throwing out some of the rankings, things like that. That it's 353 teams. Unfortunately for them, defense has not been great. Now, some of that has been swayed. Some of the early games, they're really trying to find their footing on what they wanted to do defensively. I think they've really kind of started to figure things out. Struggle a little bit at times, but, allowing almost 80 points a game, you're not going to win a lot doing that. In fact, in terms of those points per game allowed, 311th in the country. Struggling there on defense. But I think in conference play, we've seen that turnover just a little bit. And obviously, with them getting a couple of wins here, that's great. Unfortunately for them, they lost against Troy. It took them to overtime. Now, that's a game, when you go back and you look at it, probably should have won. They've struggled a little bit in sort of crunch time minutes with things. In fact, this team went from looking like a solid win with about a minute or so left in this one to looking like it was their first loss for sure with about a minute left in overtime. So things really changed. Now, Troy's a good team, though. Can't take anything away from them. But that one was just a heartbreaker. Now, the South Alabama game really ran out on them, had to hold on. A little back and forth in that one. In fact, that game was back and forth the whole time. They did get a little bit of a run there in the second half. South Alabama answered with that one. So you like to see games like that where they can hold on. Didn't work out for one, did for the other, so split the week there. But in terms of the totality of the season, let me run through some numbers here for you guys. Again, we went over the points per game and all that good stuff. Rebounding, the team is rebounding very well, 38 a game. That puts them 55th in the country. Not too bad. Unfortunately, they're allowing a lot of rebounds as well, 36.5 to be precise. Puts them way down there at 233 in the country. Their shooting percentages, let's go with effective field goal percentage. And what that is just basically everything. It's sort of the totality of shooting. Free throws, three-pointers, two-pointers, the whole bit. Not too good, and that could be part of their problem, at least on the offensive side of the ball, only 46.4%, and that puts them 304th in the country, allowing about 50.5%, 174th. So middle of the pack in terms of allowing good field goals, really have struggled on the offensive side of the ball, and I think we've noticed that a lot. Again, that 73.5 points per game, not really the worst, but not really the best either, and there's been some ebbs and flows in there as well as this team still really trying to figure themselves out, and especially with Coach Mike Bellato only in year 2, really trying to change the culture. This is going to be a process, and I know people hate to hear that, but it is what it is. So you've got that going for you. Field goals made per game, only 24.5, so they've done some damage at the line. Ty Cockfield especially has done a lot of his damage at the free throw line, but the field goals made per game, only 24.5 on average. That puts them at 247. They allow 26 field goals per game. So in terms of the collegiate game, that's a lot. That's a lot to be allowing. The three-pointers, they're not a great three-point shooting team. Again, Cockfield kind of leading the way on that. He can get on some hot streaks, and but they don't allow a lot in terms of the three-point game. They allow about 7 a game, but they shoot about 7 a game, so it's kind of a wash a lot of times in terms of three-point line. In fact, both sides of the ball here, it's pretty dead even in terms of their three-pointers made, 7.1. Again, allowed 7.1. Three-pointers attempted per game, 21.7. Allowed attempted, 21.7 a game. So, again, it's a kind of mirror images of each other on the beyond the arc. In terms of the free throws, now I mentioned that with Ty Cockfield. The team will make 17.5 per game. They get to the line about 24 times per game. In terms of the free throws made, top 25. They are 23rd in the country in terms of free throws made. Their opponents' free throws made per game, they foul people a lot. Again, out of 353 schools, they are 351st in terms of opponents' made free throws. 348th in terms of opponents' free throws attempted. So Teams are about 21 for 27 per game in terms of free throws. This is a team, they're aggressive. They like that, a lot of times when you get that aggressiveness, you tend to hack a little bit, and that's kind of what you're dealing with here. Offensive rebounds per game, though, they do well on the offensive glass, a little over 11 a game, puts them 20th in the country. They allow a lot on the offensive glass as well, just short of 9 per game, puts them down there at 217. So you can see that there's just still a lot that this team is dealing with, and you're going to see a lot of these ebbs and flows. You see a tight game like South Alabama, and then you see things that happen like where you are against Troy, where, like I said, with about a minute left, you look pretty comfortable, and then all of a sudden you're in overtime and you're down comfortably to your opponent. But in their defense, that was their first loss at FNB, and it's going to be interesting. And I mentioned the fouls here. I found this stat, so just bear with me here. In terms of personal fouls per game, they foul 23 times per game. That puts them at 348 in the country. But they draw a lot of fouls. So, again, kind of one of these things like with the three-point line, they're sort of mirroring off and they sort of cancel each other out in terms of some of the statistics here. Opponents will foul them a lot, about 21 times per game. That puts them 33rd in the country. So it's just this team, you could tell they're a little young. They're still trying to gel. I know that's hard to kind of fathom this late in the season. We're about the midway point of things here. They've gotten some couple of wins. They've scrapped a little bit, a couple of head-scratching losses, and that's kind of what you're going to see here with a team that really is as confusing statistically anyways as the Arkansas State Red Wolves are. So it's going to be interesting. It's going to be interesting for them this coming week as they go down to Texas and deal with those two teams. Both of these games on the road, going to Texas State and UTA. UTA will start things off on Thursday, and that's a team that's a shell of itself from what we've all known and seen from this team in the past. In fact, if I can get some of their numbers pulled up here just quickly for you. In terms of points per game, they don't put up a lot, only a little over 63 a game. That puts them down there in the bottom tier of the country. Defense, they're not too shabby at that, a little 71 points per game. That's a lot under what Arkansas State is doing. So again, it's going to be interesting to watch how this game plays out. You've got a team in Arkansas State who's okay at scoring. Defense leaves a lot to be desired, but on the flip side there, the Mavs, not too much scoring, defense okay. So something's got to give somewhere. This could be kind of a low-scoring affair. I'm thinking, maybe in the upper 50s, lower 60s type of game. Could be a slugfest as well. Arlington, not really a team that shoots the ball well, only 44%. So this could be a little bit of a brick fest. Hate to say it like that. Their effective field goal percentage, only 44%. I mean, that puts them right down there with Arkansas State. And again, it ties in the three-point shooting and everything like that. Mavs not really much of a three-point threat, whereas Arkansas State is okay at the three. Arlington, not so good at the three. In fact, they're darn near dead last in the country. So I think this is a thing where you're going to see Arkansas State almost dare them to shoot the three. And with that, though, you have a lot of opportunity for a lot of long rebounds in this one. And in terms of the rebounds, Arlington gets after the boards a little bit. Offensively, they get about 9 offensive rebounds a game, 23 in terms of defensive. So they kind of middle of the road, middle of the pack here in terms of allowing things, kind of along the same thing. 8 offensive rebounds per game and just short of 24 defensive rebounds a game. So if this is going to be a strategy that is employed, I think you're going to see a lot of those long rebounds could really change the sort of the flow of the game. This one could be ugly. This one I think is going to be a dogfight for sure in this one. So that one's going to be interesting to watch. In terms of Texas State, man, this is a team that looks like it could be in the brackets. I mean, they are pretty solid. And they're not a strong offensive team, but they will lock you down on defense. In fact, only allowing about just short of 65 points per game. That puts them in the top 30 in the country. In fact, at number 27. They, like I said, they don't put up a lot of points, only just a hair over 72 per game. Puts them at 191 in the country. So, again, they're going to live on their defense, and they are going to really get after you on the defensive side of the ball. In fact, here, just kind of run through some of their numbers real fast. Their opponent's effective field goal percentage, 46.3%, puts them 31st in the country. They don't allow a lot of free throws. or I'm sorry, they do allow a lot of free throws. A little different here, but you know, so they tend to foul a lot as well. So it's going to be interesting to watch this one go. Let me just get down here to some of these defensive numbers for you guys here. Opponents' field goals made per game. You're not going to get a lot of opportunities with them because they tend to slow things down. So you better make them count because they do not allow a lot of field goals per game. Only just a hair over 21. That puts them 10th in the country in terms of the opponent's field goals actually made. And they will attempt not many as well. They're only allowing just under 53 shots per game. So again, you really got to take advantage of what they give you. And you kind of go through some of the three-point numbers. Same thing there as well. They will foul you. Now that's could be part of some of the reason that you're getting some low outcomes with them defensively. They allow 15.5 free throws made per game. So you're getting a free about 16 per game out of them. And if you're not hitting a lot else, they will live with that. So it's going to be interesting to watch Arkansas State take on these Texas teams with kind of the different styles, whereas Arlington struggles offensively. Defensively they're doing okay, not great. Texas State, though, really good at defense, something they really harp and put a lot of emphasis on. So I think that one is going to be interesting there. Now, I don't have near as many numbers on the women's side. It's just kind of hard to find them without crunching them all yourselves. But, this is a team that we've seen start to kind of pick things up. They swept their opponents in South Alabama and Troy this past week, and that's impressive to say the least. With both of those teams doing as well as they were in this thing, it's kind of fun to watch this team evolve, and they've got some athletes, and we've always said that they've had some athletes in this thing, and statistically, again, a lot of things left to be desired with them as well. So it's going to be interesting to see how they will try to bounce back at home. Again, they've only got one home loss on the year. Should be fun to watch this team take on the two Texases over on the women's side of things as well. Okay, so in terms of some of the numbers for the women's side here, again, it's a little harder to find some of these numbers readily available without crunching them yourself. So, just kind of roll with me. And again, we're dealing with 351 teams on the women's side. So just bear that in mind when I'm throwing out some of the rankings and all that kind of good stuff here. The 2-pointers, they kind of break things down from what I found here a little bit differently. They're 116th in the country in terms of 2-pointers attempted, so they kind of like that, but they're 202 in the country with the 2-point field goal percentage, 43.7. The 3-point percentage really not that great either, 28.6. You'd kind of like to see that number up there around the mid-30s for the girls. In terms of the assists, they don't whip it around kind of the way you'd like. Only 187 assists on the season, puts them 247th in the country. So defensively, not doing too bad. It's just the effective field goal percentage for this team, at least. They're just sort of really middle of the pack with things, and that's kind of reflected in the record, only 8-7, but kind of coming to life here this past weekend. Again, knocking off two really good teams in South Al and Troy on the road, no less, in that one. And they really just boat raced South Alabama, and that was only their second loss on the year. So, and in conference as well. So, that's a really big one, and I think that's one that can really catapult this team going forward. And it's going to be interesting to watch this team as they get into conference play because they seem to have figured something out. And that's really, despite the numbers, because the numbers aren't really great. But here's one thing that they do. They get to the free throw line. Now, they attempt a lot. 425 free throws attempted throughout the year. That puts them first in the country. So you better bring your hard hat because these girls are going to try to pound you on the inside, and they really try to get you off your game. Because, again, like I said, they're athletic, and a lot of times when teams are more athletic, you see the reaching, maybe gambling on some things that you probably shouldn't have. Unfortunately for them, though, they got to hit more of those free throws. As again, they're first in the country in terms of free throws attempted. They're 11th in the country in terms of free throws made. They have 265, but their percentage, 62.4, puts them 309 out of 351. So I think that's one thing that they really, really need to improve on to really kind of kickstart this thing, because I think they've found a formula that kind of works for them, and it's going to be they're going to grind you out and they're going to use their athleticism to their advantage. So it should be interesting to watch some of this as it goes throughout the conference season, because again, like I said, they seem to have found something. 3-1 to start this thing off with. It's not too shabby. You like to be on the top rather than on the bottom as we get things going here. Again, a lot of the other stats and the numbers that puts them sort of in the middle of the pack. Steals per game, a little over 8 per game, 130th in the country. So they'll get to you. Their true shooting percentage is 48.3, 199th in the country. So not too bad, but not all that great either. They turn the ball over a little bit here, 16 a game. That puts them kind of down there over 200. So this is a team that you can tell is still kind of young in some spots. And it's going to be interesting to see how they evolve. And again, that Alabama twosome that they had to deal with. I mean, those were two formidable teams in the women's level. Knocked them both off. So which team are we gonna see here? Is this a thing where, again, like I said, that could springboard the team into the rest of the season? We'll have to wait and see. Peyton Martin leading the way here, 15 a game, a little over 6 rebounds a game. So really, she's been a focal point of things. And again, she's one of the forwards. She's banging down low, get those free throws. And again, some of the guards will use that athleticism to their advantage. All right. Well, I've done an awful lot of talking in a shorter amount of time. But again, I think by next week, we'll have the new setup and running. We'll get everything sort of back to normal here for you guys here. So for now, hopefully, we won't have any more coaching announcements to make for the football team. Hopefully, the both men's and women's team can really get things going on the hardwood. Both teams dealing with both Texas's teams this week. The men on the road, women will be at the bank up there in Jonesboro. So make sure you go check those out, and we will bring it right back to you here next week on the Wolves Den. And like I said, hopefully we'll be more back to normal. We'll have some folks calling, kind of give some of their hot takes on this team as well. But for now, we will see you guys next week.